Hi everybody, I'm Harry C. Nagel, PhD student at the Faculty of Protestant Theology and Religious Studies in Brussels. And I lecture, among other courses, the history of Protestantism in Belgium. We are in Brussels, in the center of the town at this beautiful Grand Place. Each year, millions of tourists come to visit this place. But 500 years ago, a different vibe prevailed here. On the 1st of July 1523, two Augustinian monks died at a stake here on the Grand Place in Brussels. And why? Because they were followers of Martin Luther and they spread his teachings. Martin Luther had documented his 95 theses, and on the 31st of October 1517, these theses were nailed on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg. There was an Augustinian monastery in Antwerp, and the prior and the monks spread Luther's teachings. Luther's writings were also quickly available in Antwerp. But in January 1521, Martin Luther was excommunicated by Pope Leo X, and a few months later also by the Emperor Charles V. As a result, Luther's teachings and writings were no longer allowed to be distributed. But the monks of the Augustinian monastery in Antwerp continued to spread Luther's teachings. And in early October 1522, the prior and all the monks of the monastery in Antwerp were arrested. During interrogations, most of them confessed and recanted their heresies. But the prior and two Augustinian monks remained faithful to the teachings of Martin Luther. The prior asked for a few more days of reflection, but the two Augustinian monks, Hendrik Vos, Johann van Essen, died at the stake here on the Grand Place in Brussels on the 1st of July 1523, about 500 years ago. They were the first martyrs of the Reformation. In the wake of this horrific event, the Faculty of Protestant Theology and Religious Studies in Brussels organized a colloquium to discuss what has changed in these 500 years after the first martyrs of the Reformation. After a historical introduction regarding the 1st of July 1523, this colloquium addressed the impact of the Reformation on various topics. All presentations of this colloquium are now available in a book. The first chapter of the book describes the political and religious context of the 1st of July 1523. All speakers at this colloquium will now give a short introduction of their presentation.
It's no coincidence that in 1522 the Antwerp prior Hendrik van Zutphen was liberated when he was arrested by the Inquisition by a bunch of Antwerp women. In his sermons, in the way they celebrated Holy Mass, in the way they treated people in their pastoral care, women were appreciated by the first Augustinian convent in Antwerp. This is explained because they returned to the sources independently of Luther, but of course inspired by Luther, and they discovered that in the Bible all men are equal, women are men, are human beings, so they are equal as men before God, and also in church and also in society.
My chapter in the book will deal with the relation between Protestant Reformation and Catholic Counter-Reformation. At first sight, you think these two are adversaries, are enemies. They do not understand each other. And to a certain extent, that is true. But what I want to show in my article is that when you look at a deeper level, you will see that there are great resemblances between the two, resemblances which will eventually lead to the path of secularization. And when we apply it to today, we will see that both Protestants and Catholics are facing the same issues and the same problems.
When we're talking about Protestantism, very often we also think at the concept of democracy. Democracy was not a direct child of Protestantism, but the Protestant movement generated democratic impulses. Those impulses were translated in different churches in different countries in different ways. And at the basis, basically, the general priesthood of believers was feeding the democratic idea, and this idea was transposed in different countries all over the world.
My book chapter will be about ethics, the impact of the Reformation on ethics, and I will focus on one topic in particular, and that is virtue ethics. My thesis will be that the virtue ethical tradition is not abandoned and is not disappearing in the Reformed and Lutheran theology of the post-Reformation era, but that it continues to be one of the most important sources of doing ethics.
When it comes to the impact of the Reformation on interreligious dialogue, we have to face that there's also a dark side of the Reformation. I talk about the long history of anti-Semitism that stretches back to the beginning of Christianity and gained importance in the Middle Ages. The Reformation period, also the year 1523, played a central role. Martin Luther's anti-Jewish writings are a burdening legacy the Protestant Church has to deal with. Luther believed that the destruction of Jewish synagogues was something to be done in honor of the Lord. Today, Church knows it better. It has taken a clear position in the face of the still existing problem of anti-Semitism, but this was a process that took many centuries.
I discuss the heritage of Reformation in view of the future. I look at freedom and connectedness that we have to establish with the planet, with nature. That means that we are free if we are connected. A second topic is the need to believe in progress. Faith must become trust in evolution. At last, I propose to connect serenity of God with the theology of resilience. This means that we put human rights before creeds.